Nora Altakika's voice was a gift. Her music wove tales of love and loss, of desert winds and ancient cities. Nora's fame spread like wildfire. Her songs were the soundtrack to weddings and celebrations, her melodies etched into the heart of Kuwait. But fate, it seemed, had a cruel twist in store. The news spread like a desert storm, swift and unsettling. Nora Altakika, the beloved songstress, had vanished from the public eye. Her once vibrant presence was gone, leaving behind a void in the heart of Kuwait's music scene. As weeks turned into months, the whispers about Nora's disappearance took on a life of their own. Theories, both mundane and outlandish, circulated through the cafes and majlises of Kuwait. Some clung to the hope that she would return, her voice once more gracing the airwaves. The phone rang, shattering the quiet hum of Nora's apartment.
My daughter's wedding. Only you, Nora Altakika, can be the voice of this celebration.
Nora politely declined, citing her band's need for rest after a long string of performances.
It's my daughter's dying wish for you to sing at her wedding.
With a sigh, she agreed, a decision that would soon plunge them all into a nightmare. The address led them to the outskirts of the city, away from the familiar bustle. The mansion loomed before them, a fortress of pale stone under the unforgiving desert sun. As they approached the grand entrance, the band members exchanged uneasy glances. The doors, intricately carved with ancient symbols, swung open as if beckoning them inside. This place held secrets dark and ancient, and they had just stepped into its web. A group of women emerged from the shadows, their figures tall and imposing.
Something isn't right.
Shams, the drummer, her usually vibrant face now pale, leaned towards Nora.
The bride awaits.
The wedding hall was a spectacle of both grandeur and strangeness. Guests thronged the hall, their numbers far exceeding Nora's initial estimate. Their attire was a bizarre mix of ancient and modern silks and jewels clashing with rough-hewn fabrics and archaic amulets. Massive platters groaned under the weight of the feast, but instead of the expected array of dishes, there was only meat. At the head of the hall sat the bride and groom, their figures draped in heavy fabrics that shimmered under the flickering candlelight. The band began to play. The music, a lively Khaliji rhythm, was meant to celebrate life and love. The guests, as if on cue, began to sway to the music. Their movements were jerky, unnatural.
The musicians exchanged worried glances.
Shams, her brow furrowed in concentration, pounded the tabla with a ferocity that belied her growing fear. As the tempo increased, the guests' movements became more frenetic. Exhaustion gnawed at Nora's bones. She had to get out of the suffocating atmosphere of the hall, even for a moment. A broad staircase, its handrail cold and slick beneath her touch, beckoned her upward. The upper floor, in stark contrast to the opulent hall below, was shrouded in shadows and dust. Exhaustion overwhelmed her fear. She lay down, seeking solace in the quiet darkness. The dream was a torrent of terror. A monstrous woman, her face obscured by a veil, chased her through the mansion's decaying corridors. Nora woke with a gasp, her heart thundering in her chest. The room was plunged in darkness.
That was when she saw it. A child, its form shimmering as if woven from moonlight, stood at the end of the hall.
Drawn by an unseen force, Nora followed the ghostly child deeper into the mansion's shadowy heart. The child, its laughter echoing like wind chimes in the silence, disappeared up the stairs, the sound urging her onward. Nora climbed the stairs, each step heavy with dread. The air grew thick, heavy with the perfume of decay. The third floor was a tomb. Darkness clung to every corner, untouched by the faint moonlight filtering through grimy windows. The child stood before a door, its small hand resting on the tarnished handle. It turned, its face lost in the shadows, and pushed the door open. The room beyond pulsed with a darkness so profound it seemed to suck the air from her lungs. The door slammed shut, the sound echoing like a death knell in the oppressive silence. Panic threatened to consume her. She was trapped alone in this decaying prison.
Sing for me, your voice. It calls to me.
Nora's blood ran cold. She recognized the voice.
Do not be afraid, little Nightingale. I am a friend. a loyal admirer of your exquisite voice.
Terror lent her strength. She broke free from the unseen grip, her heart pounding against her ribs. They were trapped in a nightmare, ensnared by something ancient and evil. She ran, her breath catching in her throat, back towards the staircase, the voice echoing behind her, urging her to sing, to stay. She fled down the stairs, her hand gripping the railing, her feet barely touching the steps. The opulent grandeur of the lower floors now felt like a mockery, a gilded cage designed to trap the unwary. She burst into the changing room, her chest heaving, her mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. The other band members looked up, their faces a mixture of concern and relief. Shams, however, sat huddled in a corner, her eyes wide with terror, her face ashen. Nora as a narrator. "Shams, what is it?" Nora asked, her voice trembling with concern. The drummer looked up, her eyes filled with a terror that mirrored Nora's own. She pointed a shaking finger towards the door, her lips moving but no sound emerging. One by one, the other band members shared their own unsettling encounters. A shadowy figure with glowing eyes demanding they sing, the stench of decay clinging to its presence. A man, his face obscured by darkness, forbidding them from venturing upstairs. Each story added a layer of dread to the already suffocating atmosphere. The realization hit them like a physical blow. They were not entertaining humans. These were not guests at a wedding. These were jinn, creatures of smoke and fire, drawn to their music, their fear. Section 4. The Unveiling. Panic threatened to overwhelm them. Some suggested fleeing, their instincts screaming at them to run, but Nora knew better. To run now would be to invite their wrath. They were trapped, pawns in a game they did not understand. "We have to keep playing," she said, her voice steady despite the terror. "It's the music they want. It's the only thing keeping us safe." The musicians exchanged uneasy glances. Their instruments, once sources of joy, now felt like shackles, but they understood. To stop playing was to risk unleashing something far worse. As the night wore on, the guests' behavior grew increasingly bizarre. Their garments began to slip, revealing hairy legs ending in hooves, eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The musicians played on, their faces pale with terror, their fingers moving mechanically. The music was their shield, their only protection against the growing madness. Section 1. The walls close in. The air grew heavy, thick with the stench of sulfur and fear. The temperature in the hall plummeted, a bone-chilling cold that seeped into their very marrow. The musicians huddled closer, their bodies trembling, their instruments feeling increasingly like foreign objects in their numb hands. The jinn, no longer bothering to maintain their human facades, began to shift. Their forms elongated, twisted into grotesque parodies of human anatomy. Claws scraped against the marble floor, their eyes burning with a malevolent glee that sent shivers down their spines. One by one, the musicians faltered. The oud player, his fingers slick with blood, let out a strangled cry as a particularly gruesome jinn leered over his shoulder, its breath hot and foul against his neck. He fainted, his instrument clattering to the floor with a discordant twang.
Keep playing, don't stop, for God's sake, don't stop!
Nora, her voice hoarse from screaming, urged the remaining musicians onward. The drummer, her face streaked with tears, pounded the tabla with a ferocity born of sheer terror. The rhythm faltered, her arms heavy, but she dared not stop. The jinn, their attention now fully on the dwindling band, circled closer, their forms shifting, their eyes burning with a hunger that chilled them to the core. Section 2. A Symphony of Terror. The wedding hall, once a spectacle of grotesque grandeur, descended into pure chaos. The jinn, their forms fluid and ever-changing, whirled around the remaining musicians. Their laughter, a cacophony of shrieks and guttural growls, echoed off the high ceilings, a symphony of terror that threatened to shatter their sanity. One by one, the remaining musicians succumbed to terror. The flutist, his eyes wide with horror, let out a shriek as a clawed hand shot out, seizing his instrument and twisting it into a mangled wreck. He collapsed, his screams lost in the cacophony. Nora and Shams, the last two standing, clung to each other, their eyes squeezed shut, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. The music, now a disjointed and desperate melody, was all that stood between them and the abyss. A massive jinn, its form shifting between that of a monstrous wolf and a hulking humanoid figure, stalked towards them. Its eyes, glowing embers in the darkness, fixed on Nora, its jaws parting in a silent snarl that revealed rows of razor-sharp teeth.
Whispering, she sang of love and loss, of hope and despair, her voice cracking, her body swaying on the verge of collapse. She sang not for the creatures that surrounded them, but for herself, for Shams, for a shred of sanity in the face of unimaginable horror.
Just when the darkness threatened to consume them entirely, a sound pierced the nightmare, a high, clear call, cutting through the jinn's laughter like a sword through smoke. The sound, faint at first, grew steadily in volume, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. The adhan, the Muslim call to prayer, echoed through the mansion, a jarring counterpoint to the symphony of terror that had consumed them. The jinn, their forms flickering, their movements becoming frantic, recoiled from the sound as if burned. Nora, her voice ragged but resolute, continued to sing, her melody now intertwined with the call to prayer. It was a desperate gamble, a fusion of the sacred and the profane, but it was all she had left. The first rays of dawn pierced through the cracks in the boarded-up windows, painting streaks of golden light across the chaos of the wedding hall. The jinn, their forms dissolving into wisps of smoke, howled in frustration as the light touched them, their hold on the mansion weakening with each passing moment. Nora as narrator. "Run!" Nora screamed, her voice hoarse but filled with a desperate urgency. She didn't need to tell Shams twice. They bolted from the stage, their instruments abandoned, their only thought escape. They ran through the mansion, their lungs burning, their legs screaming for respite. The once grand halls now seemed to press in on them, the air thick with the lingering stench of decay and fear. Behind them, the jinn raged, their frustrated cries echoing through the mansion. They burst out of the mansion and into the blinding light of dawn, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and terror. They didn't stop running until they reached the main road, collapsing onto the dusty pavement.
"What is wrong, children? What has happened?"
A lone figure, an old man making his way to the mosque for morning prayer, stopped, his brow furrowed in concern. Nora and Shams looked back. The mansion, the opulent nightmare that had ensnared them, was gone. In its place stood a dilapidated ruin. The jinn, the wedding, the horror, it was as if it had never been. The old man, his face etched with concern, helped Nora and Shams to their feet. They were weak, their bodies drained from the night's horrors. The morning air, usually crisp and invigorating, felt heavy, the scent of jasmine and desert flowers tainted with the lingering stench of sulfur. The rising sun, a symbol of hope and renewal, did little to dispel the darkness that clung to them. He led them to a small tea stall that had just opened for the day, its owner, a burly man with a kind smile, looking up in surprise at their disheveled appearance. The old man, speaking in hushed tones, explained the situation. His words met with a mixture of disbelief and concern. The warmth of the sweet tea spread through Nora's cold limbs, a flicker of normalcy in the surreal landscape of her terror. She looked at Shams, her friend's face ashen, her eyes vacant, lost in the memories of the night. The other musicians, their faces etched with varying degrees of shock and exhaustion, slowly emerged from the deserted street, drawn by the beacon of the tea stall. The old man, after ensuring they were safe and cared for, excused himself, his morning prayers calling him. As he turned to leave, he placed a reassuring hand on Nora's shoulder, his eyes filled with a wisdom born of years spent navigating the unseen currents of the world.
"You have been touched by something ancient and powerful, child. Be careful. Some wounds, even time cannot heal."
News of the band's ordeal spread through Kuwait like wildfire, met with a mixture of skepticism and dread. Some dismissed it as a collective hallucination, a side effect of exhaustion, or perhaps something more potent mixed into the wedding feast. Others, however, listened with a knowing nod, their eyes reflecting an ancient fear, a recognition of the unseen forces that govern the world. Nora Al-Takaka, the Nightingale of Kuwait, never sang again. The trauma of that night, the memory of the jinn's laughter, the chilling feeling of their unseen eyes upon her, had silenced her voice, her once joyful melodies replaced by an unnerving silence. The mansion, now a condemned ruin, stood as a stark reminder of the night the music died. Locals whispered of strange lights emanating from its boarded-up windows, of the sound of ghostly melodies carried on the desert wind. The jinn, they said, were still there, trapped within its crumbling walls, their hunger for music, for fear, unsated. Nora and her band, forever bound by the shared nightmare, retreated from the public eye. They carried the scars of that night, both visible and unseen, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of the world, waiting for a moment of vulnerability, a lapse in faith, to seep through. The music had stopped, but the echoes of that night, the chilling reminder of the jinn's laughter, lingered in the air, a cautionary tale whispered from generation to generation, a reminder that some invitations, no matter how tempting, are best left unanswered.